Presiding Officer, we were promised that this was meant to be the great relaunch. We were promised a new focus, a new direction, a new plan. But instead we have more of the same sticky plaster approach, the same rehashed announcements and the same level of denial from the third First Minister in 3 years. Scotland needed a programme for government that recognised the scale of the challenge facing our country. Stagnating growth, record-long NHS waiting lists, education standards falling, rising levels of drug deaths not even mentioned by the First Minister when it's supposed to be a priority for this government. A housing emergency, but instead we have an SNP government with no vision, no strategy and no plan. And that's why it's getting clearer by the day that Scotland needs change. All the signs are that the SNP are just simply running down the clock on the last 18 months of this Parliament. Year after year, programme for government after programme for government, we see the same pattern. Long lists of pledges are made, a lot of which are well-intentioned and well-meaning, but it's immediately after the headlines have been grabbed that things start to fall apart. Many of the promises made by SNP First Ministers in these speeches simply never see the light of day. And for those that do, they are so often haphazard and incompetent in their implementation that it actually undermines the intentions of this Parliament and what people across the country want and demand. Worse still, I'm happy to take an intervention.
Deputy First Minister.
I just wondered if Labour's definition of change of things like promising energy bills being reduced by £300 but going up by 10% was really the kind of change that Scotland wants.
Anas Sarwar.
I'm glad the Deputy First Minister, who is meant to be the change candidate but actually never stood in the end, wants to try and blame a government that's been in power for 8 weeks rather than take responsibility for a government that's been in power for 17 years. So worse still, many plans pile yet more pressure on Scotland's public services and leave working people paying more and getting less. I've just started my contribution, but we can break through this managed decline and demonstrate that we can have effective government here in Scotland that delivers for the Scottish people. And that's why, unlike the gloom of John Swinney and Shona Robertson, I am actually optimistic for the future of this country and believe Scotland's best days lie ahead of it. But it requires a government that is honest.
I've allowed a bit of leeway for reaction to comments, but the ongoing brouhaha, particularly from the front benches, let it be said, is unacceptable. We will listen with some respect to the person who has the floor, and at the moment that's Anas Sarwar. Anas Sarwar.
Well, Presiding Officer, they said they were going to learn the lessons from the verdict of the Scottish people. Clearly, they aren't learning the lessons of the verdict of the Scottish people. But it requires a government that is honest. The First Minister had 30 minutes to speak, and I'm barely into 3 minutes. But it requires a government that is honest about the scale of the challenge it faces and focuses on tackling them. That is the test this programme for government needed to pass, but it has failed. We need a government that gets on with the job of reversing the damage done by this SNP government, a party that has lost its way, is incompetent in government and is bad with people's money. The First Minister leads an administration that raises revenue, that can grow the economy and can make laws here in Scotland. It has control of our NHS, our schools, housing, justice and more. But more often than not, and we've heard it again today, they would rather talk about what they can't do rather than what they can do. Always making excuses and always somebody else to blame. And frankly, as the election in July showed, Scots are sick of it. We need to build an NHS fit for the future and there when people need it, so we can have a genuine catch-up plan and clear the backlog that now sits at 864,366 Scots. That's 1 in 6 Scots on an NHS waiting list, and those numbers continue to grow. It's the same story across the NHS. Brave staff trying to deliver services in impossible circumstances, all while this government ignores the problem. The number of operations being scheduled remains well below pre-pandemic levels. There are still over 3,000 nursing and midwifery vacancies. Delayed discharge rates continue to rise, but despite this, nothing in this programme for government will tackle the record-long waits in our NHS and get our healthcare system working for patients again. The First Minister declared that this was a programme for government for Scotland's children, but it's clear this incompetent government yet again has no plan for Scotland's young people. Just yesterday, his government cut mental health support to young people. Nearly 1 in 6 children and young people who need support with mental health are forced to wait more than 4 months to get help, and shamefully, 1 in 4 children asking for help with a mental health crisis are turned away. Families abandoned by the SNP government, and his plan does nothing to help them. And it's the same story in education. The SNP has broken its promise on the attainment gap, with results showing it's widening on John Swinney's watch. And let's not forget, this is the same man who attempted to downgrade the grades of working-class kids during the pandemic. And on his watch, Scotland is falling in the international league tables. And for all the talk of teacher numbers, over 400 teacher posts have been cut in Glasgow alone, all while violence in our schools is on the rise. But despite that, nothing in this programme will get to grips with the crisis in Scotland's schools. And in the past 12 months, we have seen record levels of drug deaths in this country, and nothing in this programme for government to attempt to deal with that crisis. Scotland's housing crisis is getting worse. Hard-working Scots looking to buy their first home priced out of the market, and too many struggling to make ends meet while rents rise and rise. A shocking 10,000 children in temporary accommodation without a home to call their own. And across Scotland, communities are left feeling unsafe because our justice system is broken too on their watch, and we have a crumbling police estate and a huge court backlog. Again, nothing in this programme for government to address that. So this programme for government is not up to the scale of the challenges facing Scotland, but change is possible. In 2026, we can elect a government that is optimistic and positive about the future for Scotland. A government about service, not party. A government about delivering for the people of Scotland, not seeing politics as a game. A government of decency, integrity and honesty, not defending our pals. A First Minister who wants to announce a change to the Ministerial Code today, but forgets his own behaviour in the Alex Salmond inquiry or indeed the Michael Matheson scandal. A government that gets on with strengthening and reforming our institutions in Scotland, left weaker after 17 years of SNP government. A government that wants to change our country for the better and realise the hopes and aspirations of the people of Scotland. A government of service for Scotland. A government that will reform our NHS and make it fit for the future. A government that will get our education system back on track and make it once again the envy of the world. A government that will partner with business to jumpstart economic growth and deliver prosperity for Scotland. A government that will take head-on the housing emergency and realise the dream of home ownership. A government that delivers change. Scotland needs change. It's sick of this failing SNP government, and Scottish Labour is ready to deliver it.